Good evening and welcome to Kim Newman, Public Programs Manager at the Cooper Union. Thank you for joining us remotely as we celebrate the work of design students from across all of New York City as part of our annual New York City by Design Student Showcase. This collaborative program with FIT, Parsons, Pratt, SVA, and Cooper is one of my favorites, and Cooper is proud to host this year's current virtual format and share the incredible work of our students, many of whom are graduating. I'm honestly amazed each year to see the variety of design work represented at tonight's event and the myriad ways our students address the annual theme, which this year is friction. I want to applaud and thank our students for their tenacity, flexibility, creativity, and commitment to their education as all of it's adapted together on a new way of learning. I also want to thank my partners on the Student Showcase, Alan Chachanov at SVA, Anita Cooney at Pratt, Anthony Curry at Parsons, and Troy Richards at FIT, as well as Valerie Hoffman and Maya Bayram at New York City by Design. And then I don't know if you guys want to say a quick little hello or so a little housekeeping about how tonight will work. There'll be 2 projects per school. If you have questions for a student, please send it with the student's name via the Q&A box in Zoom. We'll have time for a question or 2 immediately after each presentation. Also, there's closed captioning available tonight at the bottom of your screen as well. So now, without further ado, please allow me to introduce this evening's Cooper Union students. First off is a group project, Open Studio, an experiment in digital collaboration by 3 School of Art seniors, considering how to create a completely remote, non-hierarchical, process-based design studio determined to push the limits of collaboration in digital spaces. The students are Nick Marabella, a designer and illustrator based in New York, John Christian Rose, a designer and art director based in New York, and Nicholas Graziola, a designer and animator based in New York. And then after they present, we'll hear from 5th-year architecture student in our School of Architecture, Mudong Jung, a Korean designer raised in Seoul and Singapore, who is interested in the relationships between the field of architecture and other multidisciplinary fields, such as ecology and visual arts. He'll be presenting his Bachelor of Architecture thesis, Century Without Humanity, which explores methods of visualizations and projections of our physical environment through an ocular analysis of species and translation of geographical data to an abstract 3-dimensional environment. Let's start. Nicholas, and John, take it away.
Thanks, Kim.
Great. Can everybody see this? Great.
Hi, I'm Chris.
Nick G.
I'm Dem, and we're Open Studio, a group of 3 graduating seniors from Cooper Union and best friends. We're interested in exploring the friction created by collaborating in quarantine, assessing digital spaces, and exploiting tools frequently used to collaborate. Open Studio essentially serves as a framework for us to explore ideas of intense experimentation and make conceptually related work.
We used a combination of 3 tools, all of which had real-time collaboration features built into them. The tool we spent the most time in was Figma. Normally, Figma is used for web and app design, but we tried to explore new ways of using it for graphic design and branding. Discord served as a meeting space for us, as well as a space to share tools, resources, and documents. We then used Keynote to collect what we made and present it to our professors for feedback.
Through the exploitation of these collaborative tools, we pioneered several ways of making that were heavily centered around ideas of iterating and experimentation. These methods of making were less concerned with the final output and more with the process itself. Our methods were also inspired by tools used to facilitate artistic collaboration, such as the exquisite corpse and other surrealist constraints. The first method of making we explored was all hands on deck, which is essentially a timed exercise in designing work unpreciously. We applied this exercise to creating a studio identity for ourselves and branding for the project overall. We contrasted the free-form experimental nature of this process with giving ourselves a rigid constraints to act as an underlying framework for creation, namely working within a 4-hour time span, building on the ideas of others, and creating with the expectation of our work being either remixed or reworked. In the end, these were a few of our favorite logo types to come from the process. And this was our final logo mark and type branding system.
The second method of making we explored was called parallel tracks. Here we worked independently but simultaneously in parallel rows of artboards. We applied this exercise to creating a series of promotional postcards that introduced our studio and our core ideas. We worked in 4-minute intervals to create the front and back of each postcard. Working in linear tracks simultaneously allowed us to assess what all of us are making in real time and continuously rip assets from each other's work for our own compositions. These are a few of our favorite postcards that we made.
The third method of making we created was called pooling resources. Here we collectively created an asset library of small drawings and text and set out to design a series of studio merchandise with the designs made only using this asset library. For this project, we designed independently, but we all had a hand in the making of each t-shirt, given that we all contributed to the shared asset library. Despite working with a finite pool of assets, the iteration process resulted in really distinct compositions, as each image and text were combined in new ways by each designer. And in the end, these were a series of posters that we created using this process. Beyond the projects just highlighted, we were able to employ these same methods of making to create an expansive body of work, including Cooper Union merchandise, editorial illustrations, an Open Studio website, and a New York City post-COVID reopening campaign.
Overall, Open Studio allowed for us to assess the friction within digital collaboration and to use it as a generative tool. Our methods and constraints resulted in a large body of experimental work from which we were able to glean lessons about workflow, iteration, and generally how to function as a group online. Ultimately, we learned that friction is inherent to digital collaboration and that instead of trying to dismiss it, we should embrace it as an integral part of our identity.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
If anyone has some questions, we can take one in the chat or in the Q&A box, but I actually have a question for you guys about, you said you worked in 4-minute intervals. Like, was there a particular reason that you chose that time frame? Like, how did that impact what you were doing as a collaboration?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was just one of many tools and many constraints that we kind of used across a series of projects, but essentially because we were kind of working on top of each other's work so consistently, and so much of the work was kind of unprecious in the sense that anyone kind of had a hand in real time, you know, reworking or remixing whatever each other were making. Having some rigid constraints such as, you know, setting an exact time limit that we would iterate on designs and things like that, it kind of helped us just have a groundwork or like a background kind of structure to kind of serve as the framework for some more intense experimentation.
Good. All right, well, thank you guys again. And we have now moved on.
Oh, let me share my screen. All right, so good evening. I'm Mudong Jang. My thesis explores the visualization and understanding of spaces through non-human vision that we know exist, but that we cannot access. The chosen site is DMZ in Korea, which is an environment that have been untouched by human for more than half a century. So with available topographical data, I've modeled and abstracted a world of DMZ, and this is revisited through the lenses of species that reside in it. So for now, I will show a film that describes my investigation. So sit back and relax.
Perception, or a point of view, is in its nature inherently subjective. For we come to understand that every species on Earth that is anyway sensitive and in any manner conscious regards itself as human being. It knows and is aware of hierarchy of being above, below, and around it. That is to say, whatever it is, or wherever it is, it's in the middle. The subjectivity in our perception of a place is inevitably affected by different factors we, as individual beings, encounter or experience, and such differences thus alter the ways in which an individual organism perceives a specific place. Throughout the ages, humans as species have inhabited and explored most of the lands on the map of the Earth, and even the lands that might have not been covered are now readily available to us as various representations through technologies like satellite imagery. But what if there is a place where human inhabitation has come to a halt for a long enough time, and any visual representations of such place is not accessible for entry? Then, how do we begin to visualize and understand such a place and abstract out the reality within? A place where our privilege of human interaction and occupation is dismantled, and the environment has been untouched and cut off from the rest of the world for a long time. Such a place then becomes a site in which we can begin to build a world of aesthetic visualizations and projections by utilizing any available geographical information. With the acknowledgement of the fact that we, as species, co-inhabit any environments with many other species, it is only natural that we begin to question the potential differences in the perception of an environment between these species, especially the aesthetic perceptions of a place where some species have the privilege of entering, unlike us. The Catalog of Species aims to understand the ocular mechanisms of individual species. With the information from the catalog, the site is revisited through the lens of the species. The attempt on the visualizations of the abstract realities of such a place, from the points of view of these species, can perhaps in some way or another broaden the ways in which we perceive the world, and provide a moment that is not too soon to realize that there is more to what meets the eye.
All right, so as shown in the film, the exploration on the visualization of abstracted DMZ through non-human perception is my attempt on an overarching idea of what it means to decenter the human perception when we present ourselves in an environment where the environment itself is co-inhabited by many other species, including us. Thank you.
Again, if anyone has any questions, please put in the Q&A box. But my first question actually for Mudong is, I mean, this is an architecture thesis, and it just seems contrary to, because you're not really talking about a built environment, you're sort of unbuilding the environment. Can you tell me where that came from?
Yeah, sure. I guess it really depends on how people give definition to the word architecture. But I guess for this year, I decided to take the definition of architecture to be of a practice where we as architects not only think about reality of building something, but more about analyzing what is already around us, and how then as an architect do we detach ourselves from our own human perception of an environment and bring about different perspectives that might be of help or open up the ways in which we architects perceive our site, such as our natural environment. And I guess it was more like a deconstruction of the word architecture. Yeah. that was my take on it.
Thank you, Madong. And I'm actually going to turn it over to Troy Richards from FIT.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm happy to introduce two talented fashion designers who each bring a distinctive and thoughtful approach to their creative works. Emily Amisi has designed a collection of clothing and accessories based on 19th century children's clothing and microbial images that come from the science research done by her brother. Her designs feature glow-in-the-dark elements, and she has received sponsorship from Doc Martens. And she's even embellishing shoes, of which I hope she makes me a pair. There is also Mahua Goswami. Mahua was the 2020 CFDA winner of the $25,000 CFDA K11 Scholar Award. She's an environmentalist and approaches her collection in a sustainable manner. Mahua makes patterns, colors, and textures in a very unconventional manner. She brings an energy and originality to her designs that is refreshing and really much needed as we hopefully leave our pandemic and shelter lives and re-enter the larger world. So let's start with Emily.
Hello, thank you. I'll share my screen. Hi, my name's Emily. I'm a senior at FIT and my major is fashion design. This first slide is a Clo 3D render of my garment in a more conceptual view. My thesis is inspired by, like Dean Richards stated, infectious diseases, specifically green fluorescent protein scans, as well as Victorian children's clothing. So in this render, I explored the idea of the infection growing throughout the body and how it's expressed on the exterior. And so that is this image front and back. And on this slide, this is an image of my development journal. When I design, I start with sketch and then I develop the concept through pattern and physical drape. And so that's what we see on the top right corner. And then finally, I analyze the fit before I make the final sample. This image is of my first thesis look. It has the glow-in-the-dark plexi dip stamens throughout the dress that when it's in the dark, only the stamens glow, which emulates the image of the green fluorescent protein scans. And the silhouette is inspired by Victorian children's pinafore dresses as well as bloomer, and the full dress is made from silk organza. And lastly, here are just a few images from my thesis collection. Each piece showcases something different from Victorian children's wear. For example, the top right image to the right side, the green dress that I have my cursor on, it's inspired by smocking from a christening gown. And traditionally they're smock straight, and the way I made it more modern is to blow up the image of the cells and stitch on certain areas on the dress, as well as this poncho on the bottom right-hand side that I have my cursor on. It's inspired by baby bonnets, and it's twisted and distorted. And so finally, I have this video with no sound of my first look. And that is all. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Emily. And now Mahua.
Hello, sorry. Hi, I'm going to present my screen. So hello, hi, my name is Mahua and I'm a recent fashion graduate from FIT. I specialize in knitwear design, and this is my collection. As a designer, I use fashion as a medium to explore my culture, and most of my collections are set in the streets of India, as is this one, which is called Truck Drivers and Banana Sellers. It takes on the street narrative in India, and it is inspired by all the little and big things like labor unions, street vendors, and a sliver of hope for democracy. These are a few looks from the collection. The designs themselves resituate parts of Indian design aesthetics into a more contemporary approach. It's an all-knit collection which is steeped in color, texture, and patterns. Iterations of the Madras plaid mixed with argyles and jacquards, big volumes mixed with hollowed out knits, and the age-old feminine mixed with masculine are some of the juxtapositions that create this sort of hodgepodge narrative that is straight from the streets of my homeland. Sorry. This is the first piece that I made from this collection. It's an intricately textured sweater that combines a lot of different knit structures like cables, pointels, arons, and this was sort of to represent the busyness of Indian streets. This whole piece was virtually programmed and knit at the Stoll Lab at FIT. The word guest is imprinted in bold on the front of the sweater, and this was kind of dealing with what I was feeling at the moment. I had recently gone back home to India and I was feeling like a guest in my own country, not having been back home for a long time. So that found its way into this piece. The skirt is paired with, the sweater is paired with a skirt, which is actually a vest and another sweater that can be worn as seen on the screen, and it can be worn as two individual separate pieces. The whole idea was to explore making the most out of every individual piece of garment. This is the second look from this collection. The whole idea was to explore genderless fashion and fashion that can be worn across different bodies, body types and structures. This whole look was developed around two staple pieces from the Indian man's wardrobe. The first is the lungi, which is a low hung skirt, and the second is the banyan, which is a sort of a vest or an innerwear. An iteration of the Madras plaid drapes itself around the body to form this low hung skirt that is paired with an intricately textured sweater. The sweater peeks out through this hollowed out knit vest, and the last piece that goes on top is an all knit structured corset. And the pièce de résistance is the banana bag. These four mix and match pieces can be worn in numerous ways, thus incentivizing the customer to buy less and make the most out of every single piece of the garment. The next, this is a little sneak peek of look 2. There's a little video. So that was Truck Drivers and Banana Sellers. Thank you for listening.
All right. Hi, everyone. How are you? My name is Anthony Curry. I am the Director of Events and Operations here at Parsons School of Design. I am so excited to introduce Lane. Lane Odom is a graduate from Johns Hopkins University, where he studied politics and economics. Decided his undergraduate education was just not going to be enough before he even completed his studies. He wanted his business to really be fun with the creative ventures. Lane worked in retail, interned with the trend forecasting company and a custom dress shop during his time at Johns Hopkins, before pursuing a formal education here at Parsons School of Design, studying fashion design. So I am so excited to welcome Lane to the stage, who's going to be talking about his project called Edward in the East, which is a project focused on the retrospective of Black music over the years, from jazz to hip hop, designed to embody the opposition between the freedom of the music and the restraint imposed by social norms here in the US. So Lane, I see you on screen. I'll have you take it away.
Thank you for the intro, Anthony. Okay. So like Anthony just said, my project is titled EAE, or Edward and the East. And as well as Anthony said, I did want to take a bit of a retrospective route with the project, looking at past times for inspiration. And because of my love for music, naturally I was drawn to jazz and hip hop genres of music, the styles they influenced, and the time periods which they rose to popularity. And as I thought about how this project connected to the theme of tonight's showcase, I thought I'd start here with a quite literal instance of friction within the development process of the project. Recreating this pigment smudge painting on a piece of hemp denim fabric, pressing and rubbing the pigment into the grooves of the twill weave, and the colors overlapping themselves and really competing for visibility within the 6x6 inch swatch. And so getting into some of the visual research for the project, I was looking at a lot of depictions or caricatures to highlight certain details about the time or the people that were living at the time. And there's quite a dichotomy between some depictions which depict the mid-1900s as a very glamorous and luxurious time, as well as a really contrasting and dark underbelly, which could lead people to associate different colors with the times, depending on their experiences and their point of view. And similar to that dichotomy of depictions, there's a really great disconnect between the popular jewelry at the time and its reference given, and the traditional jewelry you may find in different parts of Africa, which is really deserving of the reference. And so jumping back into considering surface design, I was trying to find ways to visualize the music that I was listening to while I was doing my research. And I wanted to try and make sense of the chaotic nature of sheet music, especially for someone who doesn't read music. The notes really don't make sense as you read them on the page. Trying to find a rhythmic pattern to go across the clothing, either in print or embroidery or even laser cut manipulation. And so as we start to build the collection and think about the aesthetics and the garments that will be offered, there's two really competing aesthetics that you have here. Jazz is chic and refined, versus hip hop is refined, but it's unfiltered, and it brings a certain swagger that's not wedded to perfection. And so what does it look like to fuse these two ideas together, these two concepts, and have them exist almost seamlessly on the body as one entity? And so it's really interesting going through the visual research of the project, all these competing images and ideas, and the collection really taking a quite fluid motif, extracting from the grand piano, which has a strong suggestion of motion as it repeats itself across the body in a synchronous manner. And so getting into the final outcomes of the collection, I decided to work solely in Clo 3D to create digital 3D prototype renderings. And these are the final renderings of some of the garments. And so utilizing fullness to add more detail, as well as creating a second motif through the hardware of the collection, using records as inspiration. As well as grabbing these dynamic poses from a b-boy dance animation rendered through Clo. Adding elements of improvisation to the clothing became a major focus, much like a jazz live performance might go off the line sheet and add their own flavor or taste to their playing, their live playing. And so you can see the grand piano shape permeates through the collection quite a bit, either in a more literal sense or figurative. And again, utilizing fullness for detail, as well as improvisation, adding the print to the lining of the jacket, offering maybe a reversible attribute to the jacket as well. And so the editorial shots, I wanted to design a set that referenced the jazz den, And this blue emanating light from the piano is a reference to the cover of Sonny's Blues, the book written by James Baldwin. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lane. Appreciate that. Any questions from anyone? We do have one question. So Kimberly asks, how does improvisation work in fashion?
Right. So there's certain elements that you can add to fashion that makes them more modular and allows them to work in different ways. So it wasn't shown in the presentation, but one of the designs has a zipper going up the inside of the sleeve of a jacket. So it can be a trench jacket that is suited for handling the elements, or if you want to allow to have like a bit of a flare sleeve and open up your arms, it can work like that in a cape. As well as one of the images from the lookbook with the pants rolled down. Those can actually roll up and be buttoned completely, just like a normal high-waisted pant. But adding that lining on the inside around the waist, which you don't normally have in pants, allow for them to be rolled down and actually add an element to be seen for the wearer.
Awesome. And another quick question, what kind of fabrics would you play with in designing these?
A lot of structured fabrics and twill fabrics. I actually made a conscious decision to consider structured and twill fabrics just because the motif was so fluid and I wanted them to be captured within the fabric, almost like capturing a moment in time, just like looking at the past time periods for inspiration.
Awesome. We have someone ready to buy them in the chat. So Lane can see those questions, so he'll totally reach out. But thank you so much. Appreciate it. And I think next we have SVA, right? Oh no, Pratt. Anita, it's all you.
Hi, thank you, Anthony. Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. It is my great honor to introduce two compelling projects from two of our talented students at Pratt. Zilan, or Lan Chen, who just completed his graduate studies in industrial design, will show us a video about his thesis project, Mixosuit, a soft exoskeleton for home rehabilitation. Inspired by his childhood friend whose challenges with mobility arising from cerebral palsy meant she was taunted by the other children, and recognizing the dearth of therapists in China, Lan set out to address the needs of children with cerebral palsy today. His combination exercise, body support, and phone app can be understood as a proactive demonstration of friction to agitate the body in order to build strength for increased mobility. Lan's design enables those who use it and offers equity of improvement for all children subject to the effects of cerebral palsy across China. The unintended consequences of this proposal, Lan's ingenious prototype may also help adults. Kudos also to Lan's thesis advisor, Professor Rebecca Pales-Friedman. Our second presenter is Aoife McCall, who just completed her BFA in interior design. Aoife's thesis project, Fragments Reconcile, addresses the challenges of life for young adults in Derry, Northern Ireland, where the impact of 30 years of conflict known as the Troubles still affects the social, economic, and cultural well-being of the region some 20 odd years later. In this case, the violent protests so many years ago are arguably a case of extreme social friction in response to religious and political discrimination of a minority, Catholics who are also nationalists committed to Irish independence, by the majority, Protestants, Unionists committed to remaining part of the United Kingdom. As friction still reverberates throughout the city, Aoife's proposal aims to address it through design that empowers the residents, offering social agency and community. Once again, kudos to Aoife's thesis advisor, Professor Melissa Cicchetti. So we'll start with Lan.
Sure. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Lan from Pratt, majoring in industrial design. I believe every child has equal rights to access medical care, but I see friction between parents' unreserved love and unforgiving disease. I see the friction between children's desire for recovery and limited medical resources. So my current design is to apply soft exoskeleton to help children with cerebral palsy to the lower limb rehabilitation trainings in the underserved areas. So please enjoy the video about my project. Hi everyone, I'm Lan. Welcome to my presentation. My project is the Mixosuit. First of all, I will show you the story of May, who was diagnosed with cerebral palsy. 70% of children with cerebral palsy like her live in poor areas in China and cannot receive effective treatment due to the unequal distribution of the medical resources. Cerebral palsy is a leading cause of children's disabilities affecting their body movements and muscle coordination. Physical therapy is the only way to help them to recover. However, most children have no access to the physical therapists. This is the main problem of the rehabilitation industry. Compared to the US, only one therapist in the 100,000 population in China. So, my solution to the problem is a Mixosuit. It plays the role of the remote therapist for children with cerebral palsy who can't access to the physical therapist. The system consists of two parts, a wearable soft exoskeleton combined with a rehabilitation app. So far, my product has gone through many iterations. This is the latest product. Please enjoy the video of my prototyping process. The Mixosuit contains knee and ankle pull components. Each component comprises two frosted plastic sheets, two 3D printed pattern boards, a strap system, a controller, and two artificial muscle supports. All the patterns were carefully designed to hold artificial muscles and sensors in place. The frosted plastic sheets cover all the components. Not only it has enough strength and toughness, also its translucency can better highlight the artificial muscles. Each part is very delicately assembled together to enhance the aesthetic integrity of the product. In the color selection of artificial muscles, many bright and energetic colors have been incorporated, such as green, yellow, and orange. These colors bring vitality and make the Mixosuit more approachable, more suitable for children to use, and they can choose the color they like. So for the UI design, in order to integrate existing rehabilitation movements into the app, I collected over 200 kinds of rehabilitation movements, found the most two common rehabilitation training postures, the leg raising and knee bending exercise. Then I created the mind map and designed some main UI pages. Let me walk you through the main functions and the pages. This is homepage, talk to therapist, the training collection. This is user's profile and children training progress. Click today's plan and hit the start button and start trainings. At first, every rehabilitation movement begins with an animation to show the parents how to do this step. There is a green dot on screen. This is where a child's neck needs to reach the tapping point. Then, parents can repeat the movements on their own. The main difference between my solution and other rehabilitation apps is the real-time interaction, which means when parents move the children's body parts, the movements will be displayed on screen in real time. Also, the LED lights on sensors can visually indicate parents the moving directions. The two features can help parents do the trainings more accurately and effectively. Another technology I'm applying here is the artificial muscles. It can change the stiffness and generate enough force to correct children's muscle movements. With my current design, I consulted several physical therapists to evaluate the usability. The feedback are very positive, especially Dr. Xun told me that this product can be used not only for children with cerebral palsy, but also for adult rehabilitation after orthopedic surgery. The comments from medical device companies are also positive. This is a Mixosuit, a home rehabilitation system for children with cerebral palsy. I hope this product can bring them a happy, comfortable, and secure training experience. I will continue to work on this project as part of my PhD research. The two great hospitals will join my project and work with me simultaneously. Again, I hope my future research will help more vulnerable people and reduce social stigma. Thank you so much for listening. thank you so much for listening.
Lon, can I ask you one question?
Sure.
Tell me more when you start your PhD, which I think is extraordinary, is going to be your next step, what you think will be your first step in testing out your prototype, because it's an incredibly compelling idea that I know would be of use for adults as well as for children. So I'm really curious what you think you're going to do next.
So for right now, I'm already working my kind of PhD research. So I currently the researcher from at the KMD from Keio University. So the first step for me is to evaluate different technologies that which one is better for children with repose or adult rehabilitation training. So currently I'm just focusing on the artificial muscles, but there are many different artificial muscles in the world. I also like some shape memory alloy, and this is one thing, technology, and also the sensing, the sensors also is another problem. Another big problem is which specific rehabilitation process I need to focus on. So there are many different ways for children or adults for rehabilitation, and I need to find the pinpoints in children rehabilitation or adult rehabilitation. So there are many tons of work waiting for me in the future.
But I think your video shows that you'll probably approach it with enthusiasm and open eyes, and great things will happen. So we'll all be looking for the future of your development of this amazing idea. Thanks so much.
I'll let you know.
Good. Next, Aoife, it's your turn.
Let me just share my screen. Okay, so I'm Aoife. I'm from Pratt's undergraduate interior design program, and I'm here to present my thesis titled Fragment Reconcile. It addresses collective memory and building community resilience in the city of Derry, Northern Ireland. I myself am not from there, but my dad grew up there and his family remains there, so it's an issue very close to my heart. And the idea for the thesis really emerged out of conversations with family and friends, specifically family and friends around my age because of the unique challenges that they face. So after decades of violence and civil unrest between the Catholic and Protestant communities in Derry and British military intervention, the city still suffers among the highest unemployment, poverty, and suicide rates in the UK. Disproportionately affected by these issues is this generation that is coming of age now and that I am specifically designing for, who were born after the establishment of the Good Friday Agreement, which is, I guess, the perceived resolution to the violence. And it has caused a loss of identity, representation, and self-determination, tensions that were the catalyst for the original conflict and are being exacerbated by recent events with Brexit. So it's almost like this kind of paralyzing anxiety about the future that these conditions create. And that's the root of my proposal, which is for a small business incubator and archive, which creates tangible upward mobility and resilience while reconciling a difficult past. So these film and photography precedents touch on that specific population and their individual experiences. So my research really begins in the early 20th century when Derry was an industrial hub for the production of shirts, and they were sent to all corners of the British Empire. One by one, these factories kind of disappeared and a new industry never took this place. So I produced this shirt as an artifact of this industrial history, interwoven with memories of the conflict that followed. And my site is positioned between the one remaining industrial park and residential neighborhood, and a residential neighborhood. And it currently houses the Pennyburn Youth Club. So it's a cornerstone of the community and is accessible to many, making it an ideal place for the implementation of this thesis concept. This is a drawing that shows the site's relationship to specific man-made and natural site kind of areas of division. The Catholic and Protestant communities are separated by the River Foyle, and the relationship with the city walls, which is has always been like a symbol of status and exclusion since the city's conception. So these are the early stages of development of the project. I conceived of this model using image and text to kind of convey the feeling I wanted the space to convey. And the adjacent diagram is kind of the reasoning behind my program selection, moving from macro to micro and from collective to individual, in hopes of forming these two different types of like healing in a way. So these are room diptychs that are hand collaged, and they describe 3 rooms within the incubator. The collective space or the collaborative and mentorship program would be the setting for meetings, lectures, training, and forming connections between community members. And this is where resilience is really built and the skills are passed down. And these two ended up kind of merging in the final iteration of the project. And then the archive, which kind of becomes a place for reflection and the deposit of memory. So here's a exonometric drawing of the archive itself. I was inspired by my research into vernacular Irish architecture, which kind of consists of small cottages always centered around a hearth. This translates into the archive by becoming a centralized gathering space, emitting a glowing light where visitors can listen to oral histories or visualize them as written projections on the walls. And you can see these like smaller beacons, which are used for the recording of oral histories, and places to contribute and leave behind a piece of one's experience in the space. So here you can see in the plan how the archive is organized around that hearth, and this occupied wall kind of makes up the majority of the collaborative and mentorship spaces. And here you can see all of these spaces in section. Here's a collaborative and a makerspace textile workshop for the prototyping and learning of new skills, which kind of obviously to the new opportunities for growth in the community and for business ownership. So, and here you can see the archive and collaborative space as well. So in the entry perspective, you can kind of see the use of text and image as texture on the surfaces of the occupied wall to carry the concept of the archive as a thread throughout the space. And the collaborative area. So this is a perspective of the archive. So you can see the use of projections of image and text, which I imagine is constantly evolving as the archive grows, as the body of research grows, kind of always growing with these contributions and being switched out with new narratives and kind of layering that history in an impermanent way. To conclude, I hope this design proposal can provide this community with both tangible, concrete economic growth and a sense of reconciliation with the past. While I imagine this intervention within Derry, I could see these strategies in approaching the gathering of collective memory, extending beyond Ireland into other contexts with similar histories and tensions. Thank you.
Thank you, Aoife. I'm thinking if you can answer, then this is maybe not quite the right question, but it makes me think about, understanding that there was this serious conflict that still has residue in Derry today, and whether those beautiful ideas of image and text on surface and as memory sort of evocative on the walls and in the space reflective, fixed or changing, might relate to different identities, Catholic, Protestant, solidarity for the state of Ireland versus being part of the UK, and whether that gets muted or gets woven back together. I mean, how would you approach it if you were actually starting to think about those facades and what you would do with them? Or just curious where that plays itself out. It's a very small detail because the project is compelling and beautiful, but.
If I'm understanding your question right, I think I wanted to really prioritize the personal experience, individual experience, and to not fall into, I guess, the trap of becoming to cater to either one side or to alienate any group. It's really for healing of a memory of the conflict in general, and not so much like, you know. So I really wanted that individuality to come forth, and like everybody has their own account of what happened,
right.
And that's kind of like how I want it to translate, because that to me is the real like collective memory of the event, and it's, I think, the best way of recording that history and being able to move on from that history.
Right. Yeah, there's a comment here. I think it's more about contemplation versus confrontation, and I think that's exactly what you're speaking about, from the individual to making a collective through those individual points of view, but not as members of groups, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It's a beautiful project. Thank you so very much, Aoife. Next up is Alan Chachanoff and SVA.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, that was such a beautiful project. I really, really enjoyed all the projects tonight. And we're actually ahead of time, which is not believable. Anyway, we'll see what we can do about that. So it's my extraordinary pleasure to introduce our two presenters for this year's NYC-by-Design Student Showcase. First up will be Regina Reyes, who studied finance at Carnegie Mellon before coming to our MFA program. And she's going to share part of her master's thesis, which was a year-long pursuit looking at the theme of urban resilience. This past year has been an extraordinary challenge for people, but it's also been an extraordinary challenge for cities. I think we really, really know that in New York City. And of course, challenge for people in cities. And I think that Regina's work will touch on all three of those. Our second student tonight will be Danica Doe, who studied biomedical engineering before coming to our program, also some creative arts, at Nanjing University, and who pursued a thesis centering on Asian identity. And certainly as the events of this turbulent year unfolded, her work evolved into a suite of offerings aimed at anti-racism, looking both at history and its future, and really just touched on so many things that were always urgent, but have become more amplified right now. I will say that both of these students' thesis projects started with speculative objects and worked through industrial design, interaction design, social impact design, service design, platform design, branding, business modeling, really all of it. I'm super thrilled that we're welcoming them here tonight. But I will say, especially because we're ahead of time, I really want to encourage people to participate in the chat and the Q&A. And also, you don't need to have a question. You can just leave a comment or a curiosity or a link to something that's tangential or related to some of the work that you're seeing. And I will challenge you to see if you know how to type in the chat or the Q&A, and ask you to type the city that you're tuning in from, because we have a lot of people here tonight, and it'd be fun to see where you all are. So again, extraordinary privilege to be here with my colleagues with these amazing schools. And please welcome Regina Reyes.
Thank you, Alan. Hello, everyone. My name is Regina Reyes, and I am a service designer, a New York City resident, and an urban enthusiast. As mentioned by Alan, today I will be sharing with you the results of my year-long study on the elements that make cities resilient in the face of crises like the COVID-19 pandemic. I present to you N-3 plus me, urban resilience at human scale. Contemporary discourse in urban resilience is rooted in system engineering. In this discipline, the letter N represents the equilibrium state of a system known as homeostasis. This is the state where the system functions optimally. A -3 represents 3 elements that are negatively impacting the equilibrium of that system. And looking at this mathematical expression of resilience, I felt that there was something missing, and I wondered to myself, where are all the people? If cities are made up of people and places, then why is the human experience conspicuously absent from our models for resilient cities? A city is nothing without its people, and to emphasize this, I added a variable to the equation from earlier. The plus me you see there, that's you. There is a fundamental human element to cities, which my research explores. This past year, I watched the COVID-19 pandemic attack 3 pillars of urban equilibrium: personal protection, interpersonal connection, and community engagement. The ensuing body of work investigates how product design might increase the resilience of city dwellers by helping them to preserve their urban equilibrium under crisis. While conversing with experts who have lived through national tragedies, I came to the understanding that disaster is not an event, it is the consequence of an event. Revisiting the human nature of cities, I redefine urban resilience as the extent to which city residents can mitigate disastrous consequences. The following products are interventions to help city residents to maintain their homeostasis by protecting themselves, connecting with others, and investing in the people and places around them. An early interview with Colette Tano revealed that addressing fear might be the key to unlocking resilience. Synthesizing this insight with findings from exploratory research, I recognize personal protection to be the first foundation of urban equilibrium. Consequently, I concepted a multi-threat hazmat wardrobe called Anti, the inspiration for which came at the advent of the COVID-19 pandemic, when many people were afraid of bringing the virus back home on the clothing that they wore out to the grocery store or on other errands. Anti designs against disaster by creating a culture around garments that are made of protective fabrics like Tyvek and Nomex that are antimicrobial and fire retardant respectively. Literally beginning as a DIY garbage bag hazmat suit, Anti iteratively progressed through product refinement and reached a minimum viable product rendered in shower curtain liner and duct tape. Imagine if our wardrobes were designed not only to cover our bodies or make a statement, but to protect them from microbes, fire, chemicals, and particulate matter. That would be a world where personal protection is the reigning culture, and that world is Anti's agenda. Moving beyond protecting the individual, Fidel Harfush highlighted that very few people make it through tough times alone, with community forming the backbone of resilience. However, New Yorkers mostly live among strangers, and many of us like it that way. This phenomenon of urban anonymity, however, can cause feelings of isolation and loneliness, presenting a uniquely urban threat to resilience. This understanding prompted me to devise a way for people to connect with nearby strangers while retaining the option to preserve their anonymity. I present to you Memento. People often move to cities to enjoy the independence that comes with no one knowing anything about them. So Memento reframes the role that social cohesion plays in urban settings to balance connectedness with discretion. Though Memento is designed as a social sharing service, it doubles as a resilience gym where you can work with a coach to develop your mental and emotional strength while targeting specific goals like creating disaster plans for you and your family or overcoming a fear. This 2B journey map of the Memento experience visualizes the intended outcome of consistent participation. As users engage with one another over time, a sense of resilience displaces their sense of isolation because they have spent time mentoring and encouraging others while being mentored and encouraged in return. Memento helps users to combat urban isolation at their own pace, affording them a balance between the connectedness of life in a close-knit community and the independence of life in a megacity. While formulating product concepts for building personal and interpersonal resilience, Catherine Santana steered me toward looking at my products from a cultural angle. As I immersed myself in mid-pandemic New York City, I noticed that many people wanted to serve their communities, but didn't know how to do so. With this problem in mind, I toyed with the product ideas that could create a culture of local investment, both financial and emotional. Local board is a service concept to unite urban people and businesses around small business investments. It is an alternative financial marketplace that enables city residents to reap financial and social returns from funding local businesses. While there exist several services offering investment in private companies, these offerings primarily promote financial returns and therefore appeal to professional investors seeking to make large donations. However, none of the existing services specialize in local companies, and none of them are committed to making local impact. Local board facilitates a culture of community investment that helps local businesses thrive while developing the neighborhoods they serve, systematically supporting community advancement and collaborating with local leadership. The lived experience of city residents is critical to urban resilience because disaster is not an event, it is a consequence. Today's product selection mitigates disastrous consequences and unleashes resilience by enabling city residents to protect themselves, to connect with others, and to invest in the people and places around them. Thank you all.
Thanks, Regina. Some really nice comments already in the chat. Kim says, after a year of social distancing, the fact that Memento lets users connect at their own pace is so important. What a beautiful idea. Maybe you can actually talk a little bit about the user journey or the anticipated, user experience on Memento.
Yeah, so Memento came at the time where everyone was pretty isolated, and I was learning about the role that isolation plays in urban environments. And one of my expert interviewees had said that people actually want to be isolated to an extent in cities. And so I was kind of trying to balance the desire for isolation and independence that people think they want, but also offsetting the negative impact of the same isolation that people want. And so I realized that in urban settings, you really need to give people a bit of space so that they can connect and gradually reveal pieces of themselves as they see fit. And a famous urbanist, Jane Jacobs, also had articulated this perspective in one of her texts around the role that sidewalks and parks play in the cohesion of cities. And it is because people can kind of share a little bit of themselves without getting too personal or too close, letting people into their home. So I really pulled on that insight from Jane Jacobs, as well as my interviewee, to balance this into a digital format that was only possible at that time because there were strong stay-at-home orders and we really couldn't go out and have
Right. Yeah, you've got a bunch of architects in this room going, darn, I meant to mention Jane Jacobs too. How many points is
She's
that?
Contentious. She's very contentious. So
I don't know.
Maybe I shouldn't
Okay,
have
well,
mentioned
maybe
her.
we need we might need to have an after party, like to sing her praises. Okay, so one other question, which is about the shadow users for the DIY hazmat dress. Maybe you could actually define that in terms of its usefulness and what it surfaced out for you. It's quite fascinating.
Yeah, so the concept of the shadow user is something we had been using in our thesis process to articulate not the direct user of any product or intervention you create, but the person that kind of looms in the shadows and is a user, but it's not the person you're directly designing for. It's someone you're in a way indirectly designing for. And so for the DIY hazmat wardrobe, which later progressed into a formal wardrobe, the shadow user is actually someone who might perish in a disaster like 9/11. And the inspiration for the more formalized version of that wardrobe came from a text I had used for my research phase called American Ground, where the author recounts his experience at 9/11 and the immediate moments after everything happened, and how majority of the bodies that were not recovered from the site were those of female office workers in very flimsy blouses and dresses, much like the one I'm wearing, because the intense heat and pressure literally disintegrated their bodies. Whereas the bodies that were recovered were those of the firefighters because they were wearing jackets made of Nomex and Tyvek that are fire retardant. So I decided to play with the idea of our wardrobe as being something that really can protect us. It can be beautiful, it can make a statement as well, but at the end of the day, we wear clothes to protect our bodies. So my shadow user is the person who would possibly perish without those clothes, and even more so, their families, because it's really tough to bury someone if you don't have their body.
Wow, like so many complex elements to this. Thank you so much, Regina.
Thank you.
Next up is Danica Doe. Welcome, Danica.
Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen. Okay, thank you all for being here. So first, let's go back in time for a year. In March 2020, New York City is in lockdown because of the pandemic. And being an Asian, especially a Chinese student living and studying here, I can definitely feel the tension rising up. According to the nonprofit group, Stop AAPI Hate, nearly 4,000 incidents have been reported nationwide since the pandemic started. And what's getting worse is in this year, with the terrifying Atlantic shooting and constant attacks, hate speeches on the street. I'm wondering how might we use design to fight anti-Asian hate in the US? Hi everyone, my name is Danica Doe. Today I'm presenting part of my thesis work called Uplifting, Lifting Up, Asian Power from Our Own Hands. Although discrimination and violence against Asians only recently gained broader attention, and it seems like for some people it appears out of nowhere, but discrimination has been here the whole time. For Asian Americans, their experience being viewed as foreign, being mocked for how they look, and being perceived as a threat goes way back in centuries. For my thesis, I reviewed a variety of books learning about history, racial justice, and autobiography. I conducted a series of subject matter expert interviews to examine the social and mental aspect of this territory. And thanks to the content creator and greater Asian internet community, I also keep myself immersed in these communications and follow up what's new through my whole year process. I gathered the system map, breaking down discrimination against people of Asian descent into several categories. And today, I want to walk you through my work around culture, specifically about food culture. Well, after talking to experts and users in daily life, I also dig into these amazing YouTuber stories. They keep mentioning one experience growing up as Asian American. David Chang phrased it in Ugly Delicious. As a Korean American, he said, "There are food that I grew up loving, but I was embarrassed to public love." This is actually a very common experience for kids from minority groups. When these kids bring their lunchbox to school, they will get picked on by other kids saying that their food is weird, gross, and smells funny. So I designed a set of products called Disguised Pizza. It is built to camouflage their traditional food to help the kids not being bullied at school lunchtime. For the main lunchbox, we printed a pizza from outside to indicate other people what's inside. It is the disguise food to fit in. But when you open the lunchbox, the grid assures that a slice of pizza is not going to fit, so you can secretly enjoy the food your mom packed for you. We are also aware of the smell people complain about, so the kit also includes a camouflage spray to create a pizza smell around you, and a guide template to teach the children how to use the kit step by step. While I'm particularly aware of the negative effect hiding can do to children, and the whole product set is never meant as a real solution. So what can we do when what we like and what we believe in is being devalued in society? And how might we create an environment to show our culture instead of hiding, to feel proud of our culture instead of being ashamed? I want to invite people in, dig into stories, and educate people. So I create So Delicious, an experience populating Chinese food stories through the collection of songs. Chinese food suffers from a degree of prejudice in the US, with some people associating word with unclean, cheap, and inferior. If you think about it, some racial slurs like dog eater, cat eater are derived from the biases towards our food. As a Chinese person, I know Chinese food is much richer than General Tso's chicken and egg rolls. So I created these posters telling people the facts about these popular Chinese American dishes and invite people to leave a voicemail about their favorite Chinese dish. So do you know General Chao is a famous general in the Qing dynasty, but the chicken dish has nothing to do with him? And this dish, also the fortune cookie, are all born in the US. They're not even from China. My value proposition through the whole process is to first raise awareness and then engage people with knowledge and encourage people to share their stories. And my final goal is to get these stories to people who don't have that much knowledge about Chinese food. I went to Chinatown in New York City, talking to the local shop owners about my campaign and putting up posters in their shop windows. I also made these special fortune cookies, putting key facts about Chinese food and distributed them in the park. Here is a short clip about the interactions.
对。
Through the whole experience and social media campaign, I gathered voice stories in different languages about homesickness, memory, and recipe. What I learned from this project is how food brings people's voices and hearts together. Then I got into the crowd and started protesting this march. One slogan caught my eye: "Love our people like you love our food." This statement shows the paradox of reality and speaks to our hearts. So I thought, why not go one step further? Instead of using food to persuade people to respect us, why not turning food into our strength to defend ourselves? So I envisioned a project called Food Weapon. It is a series of illustrations featuring new ways to interact with Asian food. It weaponized the food to give the individuals the power to fight racism and let the community to be more proud of their culture through the lens of humor. I made this poster version free to download so you can print your own. I envision it being made into posters and distributed to local shops to raise awareness. Being printed on t-shirts to make a personal statement. And being held in protest to showcase Asian power. At the end of my presentation, I would like to say something to the Asian community. As one of my favorite SNL cast, also the first Asian cast, Golden Yang said in one of the skit, 加油, which means fill up in English. May is Asian American and Pacific Islanders Heritage Month. Let's bring on this attitude and celebrate it. Be proud and be brave. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Danica. Yeah, maybe you can put up a grid of the, or yeah, it's up to you. Yeah, I mean, just reclaiming these stereotypes, these tropes, using like a double edge between humor and fight has just been an incredible balance, I think, for you this year. But, you know, I have asked you in the past, you know, history really did intersect with this project. You had started this project around Asian identity before the pandemic, actually. And certainly before we have seen just an increasing anti-Asian violence in the world. And I'm wondering what it was like to have the pressure of having history running alongside while you were trying to do a master's design thesis. That must have been overwhelming at times.
Yeah, I feel like from the start, it's definitely overwhelming, and especially this year, like in March, yeah. So I think for me, it's first, I keep myself immersed in the conversations nowadays and keep getting what's new and keep learning from the people, and like first getting the knowledge and keep learning. So I can't be left out about the projects. And then I think it's to find what I enjoy the most, which is food. So I think it's keep learning and find where I stand and combine these two together.
That's a great lens. You know, I would finish by asking you, you did leave out just time constraints, one project that you did around Asian voice, and it had a great name, Kick-Ass Asian. Can you, and it was AZN, right? Can you give us like 30 seconds, okay, maybe 40 seconds on what that platform and mobile app did?
Yeah, I really, I want to call it Kick-Ass Asian because I really want Asians to be more kick-ass, and I really want us to be more proud and angry about the situation. So the platform is a platform built for both Asian Americans and non-Asian Americans. So the Asian Americans can share their stories by leaving a voice to tell their stories, and with their face, like make emotion about this. And the non-Asian Americans, they're welcome to the platform so they can listen to our stories and also learn history and culture from it. So it's really meant to be inclusive. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, this was really a treat to see you present. Kim?
Actually, and I'd like to invite everybody back on the screen for a brief bit. And first off, again, thank you to everybody. Your projects were all so amazing and so different, which is why it's so exciting to do this each year. So again, if anyone has specific questions or comments they want to leave in the chat, there was a question earlier on from Michael Lewis that was directed about fashion design, but I do think it kind of does apply to everybody's projects, especially Nick, and John, who looked at creating something during COVID. But what limitations did COVID present for your design processes and views of designing right now? And any student who'd like to speak up, go for it. Anyone? Okay.
You can do it.
I can start. So for me, so my background has nothing to do with making things. I literally used to sit at a desk in Excel all day, and then to do a first year at POD and just be fully immersed in studio and in the workshop and just like really thriving on the energy of being able to like go from a quick sketch to a really quick prototype, like kind of in a blink of an eye, just because the facilities were so available to us, was like, it was a huge culture shift for me. And then there was this further culture shift when we were not able to have access to the studio spaces and making spaces that put me back in front of the computer, but in a very different way, in 3D modeling softwares and in like Zoom and finding ways to connect with people and bounce ideas off of them and still be creative, but like by myself. So it was, I would say, a culture shock, but as I've gotten more used to being a digital designer as well as a maker, I think it has opened up my concept of what's possible for me as a designer personally. And so I actually do feel slightly more confident going back into the studio because I've now learned different ways of prototyping so that when I'm able to get back into our like BFL or visible features lab and like in the workshop making things, I feel more confident that I would have gotten through more preliminary digital versions of those products. And so when I'm in the lab making it, I like know what I'm doing as opposed to like exploring with my hands. I can explore with my computer now and then like execute with my hands. So that's just been my personal experience.
Thank you, Regina. Does anyone else have any thoughts about this, or do you guys Nick?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, this kind of quick transition to an online workspace, especially for a collaborative project, was kind of central to what we were, trying to explore, in the sense that I think just in the nature of kind of our experience at Cooper Union, I think we're all really accustomed to, sharing these physical spaces and kind of, collaborating physically in each other's studios and kind of overlapping our practices. And so I think that, core to our kind of project here was really examining, what tools were accessible to us in terms of translating that similar, studio practice that was very physical to an online space. And I think that that's kind of where we ended up with, looking to tools like Figma and to Discord that kind of had these capabilities of real-time collaboration and seeing how we could exploit those things maybe to kind of replicate in real life studio practice as best as possible. And so thinking about those kinds of real-time capabilities, I think we wanted to kind of push the limits to what we could do and how we could kind of translate design, in all different parts of the city and potentially all different parts of the world, but as if we were, sharing a single space. And so I think that was kind of a really like illuminating component to this, or even just the organization of, files like in Discord and things like that, or like, instead of dropping readings off at each other's desks, it was like, we've updated these threads with these readings that we're looking about, or sharing images that were, inspirational to us, and kind of pooling all of our resources together in these kind of online pockets as opposed to, sharing them physically.
Thanks, Nick. One other thought we were thinking is, you guys have any questions or thoughts for each other? This has been an amazing, illuminating night. And again, it's so interesting the different ways you've all approached your projects. So. Any other?
I feel like Troy has a question. I'm just watching his body language. He's sort of making up his mind.
Oh, I was letting people, I like to, not to jump in too much, but I did, I was thinking, and of course, fashion is something that's been on my mind a bit because that's who's representing us from FIT, but we also saw some really interesting fashion work tonight. And what I was surprised by, with not just these presentations, but with so many of the students that we have graduating this year, is this great use of color, a sense of optimism that I've seen in all of the designs, and so much of what everybody presented tonight. And I think that in a sense represents the friction of the theme, that on the one hand, we've got all this, we've had this real rough year, this very difficult time. But then, you've all responded to it so wonderfully, and come out of this with not only, I think, where you all present yourself with an optimism, but your work shows it. So I'd just like to hear anybody speak to that, and if that is something that we're going to see in design, whether it's fashion or home products or interiors, or So somebody just jump in. Or not, or I misread it.
I'm reading body language. I'm seeing Moa. Is that how you pronounce your name?
Mahua, yeah.
Mahua, forgive me. What a beautiful name.
Thank you. I was thinking about it, and I was thinking why I decided to use color, because I do have a lot of color in this collection. And I think for me, it was the fact that I was locked up for almost the first 3 months that I was creating this collection within these 4 walls of my apartment. And it's all just white and gray and black, and that's it. That's all I saw. So I kind of use my collection to escape from this, whatever this is. And in that, I think it kind of gave me, as Dean Richards says, it kind of made me more optimistic for the future. Like, I know that we're all stuck in this, whatever this time is. And if I had to assign a color to the year 2020, it would be gray. But 2021 is full of colors. It's full of possibilities. And I feel like that is something that the use of color in my collection kind of shows.
I actually kind of feel like that's a really nice way to wrap up, with that very positive, like, we're moving out of the gray and going to the color. And again, it's a really exciting time. So many of you are graduating, and we want to applaud you for finishing and moving to the next phase. And some have had your graduation ceremonies, and some are coming up. So congrats. And I think that's okay with all. I want to thank everybody and say goodnight. So.
Congratulations to all.
Great job.
Another
everyone.
wonderful night. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.